Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration and growth. Today I'm really honored and privileged to speak with a mental success coach and a cutting-edge leadership consultant, trainer and researcher. He helps improve organizations, leaders, teams and employees by improving their mindsets and mindfulness. Ryan Gottfredson, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Augie. I've been looking forward to this.
Ryan, I wanted to start by asking you to give us a brief background of yourself, who you are and how you became who you are.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a professor at Cal State Fullerton. So I'm a leadership professor. I do research and I teach on leadership. And then on the side, I do leadership development programs with organizations, primarily focused on mindsets. So my journey really started back in high school. And in high school, I was able to take this really cool class. It was called sports psychology. And we dove into the psychology behind elite athletic performance. And I read some great books on leadership during that semester. And I remember thinking as a high schooler, man, if I could have a career where I could write books on leadership, like that's what I would want to do. But I didn't know that there was a field of study out there that focused on leadership. And so fast forward a couple of years, I met a Harvard Business School professor and I asked him what he taught. And he said that he teaches organizational behavior. And so I asked him, what's organizational behavior? And he goes on to essentially say the psychology of business and starts talking about leadership. And so for me, that's I knew that was the path I was going to go down. And so I went and I got my Ph.D. in organizational behavior and human resources at Indiana University. My dissertation is on leadership. And as I studied my dissertation, what I did is I summarized the last 70 years of leadership research. And while that leadership research is really good, it didn't sit very well with me. Because the last 70 years of leadership research focuses on behaviors, what leaders need to do to be effective. Mm-hmm. But I think you would probably agree with me that leadership is more than just doing the right thing. It's about being a certain type of person, being somebody that other people want to follow. And so since my dissertation, that's been my focus, is how do we tap into this being element of leadership? And what it's led me to is mindsets. And so I anticipate we'll dive into why mindsets are so important to our being, but that's kind of my backstory there.
All right. And what's your definition of leadership? Because it's a word that is used in many different ways, but how would you define leadership?
Yeah, and there's 100 different definitions out there. And I'm not saying my favorite definition is the right definition, but my favorite definition is the use of power and influence to direct others to goal achievement. So what I really like about this definition is it suggests that leadership is not about a position. It's about one's ability to positively influence those around them. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's different types of power and influence. There's more negative forms like organizational power, where we rely upon our legitimate authority, maybe offering up rewards or punishments. And those aren't uncommon. In fact, those are the most common forms of power within organizations. But the better forms of power and the more effective forms of power deal with personal power. So personal power revolves around, one, our expertise upon which other people rely, and then two, what's called referent power, which is we are somebody that other people want to associate with because of the person that we are. And that's really the core of effective leadership, and being able to positively influence those around us. We need to be somebody that others want to follow.
I love this, to positively influence others and who we are, because, the term leadership, in my mind, a few years back, before I started my intensive personal development journey, and I suppose in many other people's minds, a leader is something different than what you describe. And I really like this definition of positive influence. And I completely agree with it.
Yeah, so you don't need to be in a leadership position to be a leader, right? We could be in any circumstance, regardless of our position, we could be a positive influence. And to me, that gets me excited about, regardless of what position I'm playing, about the effect that I could have on the outcome.
Absolutely. Ryan, let me ask you then about mindsets, which is your one of your expertise topics. So the first thing I want to ask is, what's your definition? What is the mindset?
Yeah, and I'm going to give you a few different definitions,
Sure.
if that's okay, right?
Yeah, of course.
Because I think I've heard people say that mindsets are the secret to success. And in my mind, it's like, I'm not sure I agree with that. Like, I agree with the sentiment. But here's the thing is, I don't think that that's all that great of a secret. I think most of us know that mindsets are essential for our success. What is a secret is, what exactly are mindsets, and what mindsets do I need to have, and how do I improve my mindsets? So those are the secrets. And so that's one of the things I'm excited to talk to you about. So let's start with that first question of, what are mindsets? So at a very basic level, and I could see you, digitally through the computer, and you're wearing glasses, right? So our mindsets are just like glasses. They are our mental lenses that shape how we view the world around us. So my guess is, when you don't wear glasses, it affects your ability to navigate in your world.
Of course.
But when you wear glasses, you can navigate much more effectively. So each of us are wearing our own unique mental lenses that are shaping how we see the world around us. And how we see the world around us shapes how we think, how we learn and behave. So one way to think about it is they're mental lenses. But then the second way is that there are mental fuel filters. Because what our mindsets do is, they pick up on select cues in the environments in which we encounter, and they affect how we interpret those cues. So for example, if I walk into a room that's full of females, I'm going to pick up on that cue. The room is full of females. Now, how I see that and how I interpret that is going to be based upon my mindset. And however I interpret that, as though this is a hostile environment or this is going to be a friendly environment, like my mind, I could have a mindset that dictates either. Well, that interpretation is going to drive how I think, how I learn, and how I behave. And so our mindsets, first, are mental lenses. There are mental fuel filters, because they filter in select information, and that fuels how we think, how we learn, and we behave. So I think to me, those are the two best ways to kind of simply describe mindsets, but we could also get a little bit deeper than that. But I want to see if you wanted to fill in any gaps there.
I actually was thinking, I remember a phrase I read about the mindset, like it is a tinted lens that based on our own belief systems, the way that we perceive the world. So the example I was reading is that if you have, let's say, red tinted glasses, no matter what it is out there, you will see things colored red.
Yep.
Which is it's an analogy, of course. So if you have blue one, you will see the same exact thing that one will see red, you will see as blue. So it's our filters of interpretation of what it is out there, which is basically what you were saying. You just said it in a more eloquent way.
Well, and I love that analogy, and I often use it. And here's the cool thing about the analogy is, if you put on red or blue lens glasses, when you first put it on, your world completely changes, right? But if you continue to wear them over a period of time, you lose track that these glasses on your head, and this different color vision is now your reality. And that's the thing about our mindsets, is each of us are walking around with our own unique colored mindsets. But because we've been walking around with these mindsets for so long, we tend to think that this is the best way to see the world. But the reality is that it's probably not the best way to see the world. And we'll dive into this. To give you an example of this, I've got a mindset assessment that I've developed. And I've had about 10,000 people take the assessment, and only 5% of people are consistently on the positive side of the different mindsets that I focus on. But at the same time, again, everybody thinks that how they see the world is the best way to see the world. And the reason why I feel like I can say that is because if we thought we could see the world in a better way, we would have done so already, right? So we're already walking around thinking that we are seeing and interpreting the world in the best way. And that's affecting everything that we do. And it's not until we become conscious of the fact that we may not be seeing the world in its most effective way. It's not until that point in time that we allow ourselves the ability to shift our mindsets.
Absolutely. And you said about the 10,000 people that have taken your test. I'm one of them. And I'm not into that 5%. I fall into the 95%.
Welcome to the club, yeah.
Well, however, I'm certainly one that is trying to change the mindset and improve it. I don't accept it, and I will never accept it if there are things that I'm not happy with. Obviously, some of them or many of them are subconscious, and I don't have direct control over them, but I have the desire to change them, especially when I understand and realize that they do not serve me and they do not serve what I want to do with my life. And coming back to your leadership definition earlier, they do not serve me as a leader, as a positive influence to others. And we'll get into those. So my next question is the different kinds of mindsets, because you say that mindset drives success and effectiveness. So what different kinds of mindsets do people have?
Yeah, and this is where, to me, there is so much power in the idea of putting labels to mindsets, because what you just said is, for most of us, what you said is reality. We are not conscious of our mindsets. Our unconscious mindsets are driving our conscious behaviors. And if we can awaken to these mindsets that are largely non-conscious, that we're largely non-conscious to, then we become empowered to do something about them. But then the question becomes, well, what mindsets do I need to have? Because we can't become conscious of something unless we can put a label to it, unless it's something that we could focus on. And so when I started to learn about the power of mindsets and how they are foundational to everything that we do, and I came across really kind of interesting studies on mindsets showing this, it led me to ask the question, well, what mindsets do I need to have? And as any good academic, the first place that I went to was Google, right? So I just searched in Google. I just said, what mindsets do I need to have to be effective? And here's what I found. Like I found, first of all, most of the articles focused on mindsets do not talk about mindsets. They're actually talking about behaviors. Second, many of the mindsets that they focus on or suggest really don't have much backing, and they probably didn't define them very well. And then third, it wasn't uncommon for me to find one article promoting one mindset and another article promoting the exact opposite mindset. So I got really lost when I turned to Google, and that was really frustrating. And so what I did is I jumped into the academic literature, and I just kind of opened the floodgates. What has been done on mindsets? And come to find out, mindsets have been studied for the last 30, 35 years across primarily 4 different areas of study: psychology, education, management, and marketing. And one of the things that's really interesting about this is each of these different disciplines has focused on their own unique set of mindsets. So independently, they've all been finding that mindsets drive our thinking, learning, and behavior, but they really hadn't been talking to each other. And so what I've done is I've compiled these 4 different sets of mindsets into one framework. And the thing that's unique about these different sets of mindsets is they range on a continuum from negative to positive. So there's a clear negative side and there's a clear positive side. And our mindsets are going to fall somewhere along that continuum. And so I developed this mindset assessment that focuses on these 4 sets of mindsets, which we can get into. But the mindset assessment allows us to try to identify where along these continuums do we fall. And then when we know where we currently are and have an idea of where we need to go, now we can do something about it. This is the process of making these unconscious mindsets conscious. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. And before we go into those specifics about the different, sets of mindsets and those continuum that you mentioned, I wanted to ask in general, people that think that our mindset is what it is and it can't really change, what would you say to that? And is it something that you encountered common, people that are not willing to see the potential to improve?
Yeah, so what you're asking is a great question, and it's going to bring me to, because I said earlier there's kind of 3 ways that I wanted to describe mindsets, and I talked about 2. So there are mental lenses, our mental fuel filters, but what they really are is they are neural connections within our prefrontal cortex. And it's these you see, what happens is when we expose ourselves to a situation, all of our senses send information to our prefrontal cortex, but we cannot capture and process all of the information that our senses are giving us. And so our mindsets have been developed to simplify this process so that we could process our surroundings more effectively. And so that we have some mindsets that are more positive and some that are more negative. And both of them exist. But for us, one is likely stronger than the other. So if we've got a negative mindset neural connection that is really strong, what that means is this is firing loud and quickly when we encounter a situation. But it's not to say that we can't see it more positively. It's just that the positive mindset neural connections just fire more softly and slower. And so when you've got a mindset neural connection that's firing rapidly and loudly, that's going to drive our processing and our subsequent behavior. And so this is just foundational to understand, because when we understand what exactly mindsets are, as these neural connections, then it opens the door for us to figure out how exactly do we shift our mindsets. And the cool thing about this is that our brains are incredibly plastic, that we can shift our neural connections within our brain. But what it takes is exercise. We've got to exercise the more positive mindset neural connections. The more we exercise them, the stronger they become, and the more we begin to rely upon them. It's just that for whatever reason, our upbringing, our life's experience, the culture that we're in, oftentimes in kind of exercises the more negative mindset neural connections. And until we can, again, become conscious of that, then we're not going to have the motivation to engage in the workouts to shift our over to the positive mindset neural connections. And before we kind of just jump forward with this, just to emphasize that this is doable, is all of this research over the last 30 to 35 years has shown that really small interventions, like a 3-minute video, a 15-minute training, writing down 2 paragraphs, these types of activities can shift our mindsets for sometimes 2 to 4 weeks.
Oh, really?
And so what happens is you can engage in these positive mindset interventions. We're going to see an effect in the short term, but we're probably not going to see it in the long term unless we continue to exercise it, right? So we've got to stack interventions on top of each other for us to be able to really build those muscles. And it's not unlike going to the gym, right? You can't go to the gym once and call yourself strong. It's got to be discipline and dedicated effort over time. And the same thing applies with our mindset. So those people who say that I'm not sure I could change my mindsets, well, you can't change your mindsets, 1, if you don't believe that you can. But 2, because you're not going to have the motivation to work them out. It's just a matter of working out these more positive mindset neural connections.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And one reason why I asked you this particular question, and you mentioned the upbringing. When I grew up, I had a very strong belief by my parents that we are who we are. Our personality is fixed, and people don't change. And as you can imagine, that has influenced me for a very long time in my life until I discovered and immersed into personal development, and I realized that this is not the case, that we can change our personality, our beliefs, our neuroconnections, which, as you describe it like that, and I know that it is doable. I understand that it is not a matter of simply just switching it like that. It takes time, and I think the analogy of going to the gym and working out on your muscles is something like that. And maybe it is, I don't know, you can tell me if I'm right, it is a lifelong process if you want to change it and improve it. It never stops. But my general question, you already answered it to some extent, is with what ways we can improve them. I mean, on a practical level. You mentioned the videos and things like that, so I suppose you refer to like motivational videos or personal development teachers like Tony Robbins and things like that, or is it something else?
Well, it's kind of all of those. Those are just great exposures to ideas and concepts that strengthen those more positive mindset neural connections. Let me give you an example of a really interesting study. So in this study, this was the time of the economic collapse around the beginning of 2009. And this group of researchers went into a financial organization, right? So they're pretty stressed out during this time. And they split the group up into two. One group, they showed them a 3-minute video about how stress is debilitating. The other group, they showed a 3-minute video about how stress is enhancing. And both of those ideas are backed by science, by the way, right? And so they're pulled from science that says both of those stories. So they showed in the 3-minute video, then they tracked their engagement, their performance, and their blood pressure over the next 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So those that saw the 3-minute video about how stress is enhancing, they had higher engagement, higher performance, and lower blood pressure. Right? So this is an example of a small intervention, a 3-minute video that at a very below conscious level shapes not only how they behave in the workplace, but their emotional attachment to their workplace, and even how their body responds to the stressful situations that they're in.
I want a link to that video. I want to watch it.
No, so you can look it up and you can see it. You can see the video. It's in a TED Talk by Alia Crum, A-L-I-A, and Crum, C-U-R-M. And if you look at, I think she's got a couple of TED Talks, but this particular TED Talk's on the placebo effect. And she walks through some really interesting studies. This is the last one that she talks about in her TED Talk. And so she shows the video and shows the results. It's really cool. So that's an example. And what happens is when we can identify the specific mindsets, then we could give us a more tailored approach to how to improve that particular mindset. So there's some general ideas of just more positive videos, listening to more positive music, journaling, and each of those are good, but we could also kind of get more specific with okay, what videos exactly do we want to watch? What paragraphs or what do we want to write about in our journal, right? That is going to allow us to touch in on the specific mindsets that we're wanting to develop.
I see. Thank you. And Ryan, can we go through then the different sets of mindsets that you have on your assessment, which I will very honestly say that when I took it, I knew about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, but I was unaware of the other classifications, the other categories. So can you run us through those 4 sets of mindsets, please?
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it. And one of the things that has been really interesting to me is I thought that these 4 sets of mindsets would be correlated with each other. That if somebody was high in one, they would be more likely to be high in the other. But what I found through my assessment is that's not the case. Is there's a very small correlation. So what that suggests is that these are very distinct ideas from each other, which I think adds some value to this mindset assessment, in that we can't just focus on one mindset because we're missing a bigger picture that's going on. And so while there's a lot of really great material like Carol Dweck's stuff on fixed and growth mindsets, right? That's really good, but it is limited in that it doesn't focus on multiple mindsets that we can be talking about. And so that's why I'm excited to jump into these. So let's start there with Carol Dweck, where she pioneered the research on the difference between fixed and growth mindsets. So as you mentioned, when we have a fixed mindset, we don't believe that we could change our talents, abilities, and intelligence. But when we do have a growth mindset, we believe that we can change our talents, abilities, and intelligence. And here's why this matters. If you don't believe that you can change and you fail at something, how are you left to interpret that? Well, you're left to interpret that as though you are a failure. And so when we don't believe that we can change, we have a tendency to see the world, either ourselves and others, as being either haves or have-nots. And of course, we want to be a have, so we are only going to put ourselves in positions where we know we can be successful. Because we don't want to be a have-not, we do not want to expose ourselves to effort, challenge, and failure. So we're more inclined to run from those things than approach them. Let me give you an example of this. Sure. So my freshman year of college, you said that you're a dentist. I had similar ambitions my freshman year of college, in that I wanted to become a doctor. Okay. So I move away from home and I sign up for the Weeder chemistry class. And it was actually taught by the guy who invented sticky notes at 3M. So really brilliant dude. And I promptly got the lowest grade I had ever received in my life. I passed the class, but it was the lowest grade I'd ever received. And I had a fixed mindset. And what my fixed mindset said, oh, this didn't come naturally to you. You better change your major, right? So here's a challenge that's in front of me. I didn't do so well, and I want to become a doctor. I mean, who would have thought becoming a doctor would have been, difficult, right? My mind just didn't even let me go there. So my fixed mindset said, because this didn't come easy, you need to change your major. Yeah. No, recognizing this now, if I had a growth mindset, it probably would have said, hey, you didn't do so well. What can you learn from this? Probably you need to double down on your study habits and become, do a better job at studying than what you had previously, right? And this was going on at a subconscious level. I didn't recognize that my fixed mindset was driving my decision to change my major. But at the same time, it made sense for me to do so. But it also limited me, and it limited my future to a certain degree. Now, I'm happy with where I'm at, but there's times in my life, as it sounds like with you, I could see ways in which I limited myself because of my incomplete and improper perspective on the world. Does that make sense, the difference between fixed and growth? Anything Absolutely. Else we need to add there?
No, I think this is, for me anyway, this is very clear. It's either if I would overly simplify it, for me it is the belief that we can change who we are and how we behave and what we do, versus the belief that no, we can't. This is how we are. So this is for me very clear, and thank you. So shall we go through the other then? Yes.
So the next set of mindsets is the difference between a closed and an open mindset.
Okay.
So when
and that's the one that I was particularly disappointed when I saw my score.
Well, let's talk about that, because that doesn't surprise me, and I'll tell you why after we kind of describe them.
Sure.
So when we have a closed mindset, we're closed to the ideas and suggestions of others. When we have an open mindset, we're open to others' ideas and suggestions, and we're willing to take them seriously. Now, having an open mindset doesn't mean that we go with whatever other people say. We can always have a stiff back, but having an open mindset means that we have a soft front. We're willing to take in ideas from others. Now, then that leads to the question, what leads somebody to have a closed mindset? And what leads us to have a closed mindset is we believe that what we know is right. And when we believe that what we know is right, we want to be seen as being right. And so to use an analogy, you see, if we compare our mind to a bucket, and if we think that we know everything, right, we know that we are right, then our bucket is full. What happens when we pour water into a full bucket? Well, it just goes off the side. We're not able to absorb it.
Yes.
And so that's what's going on when we have a closed mindset. We've got a full bucket and we're just not willing to take in ideas from other people. When we have an open mindset, we leave room for the possibility that we can be wrong. And when we leave room for the possibility to be wrong, what we're doing with our bucket is the water level just isn't to capacity. And this allows us to take in information. So it's those with the closed mindset, their primarily focus is on being seen as being right. Those with an open mindset have a primary focus on thinking optimally and finding truth. And the only way you're going to want to seek after truth is if you believe that you can be wrong, right? So there is a little bit of an ego element that's involved in this, because we want to be seen as being right. That's something we all value. And sometimes that ego barrier and also the blind spot barrier that we don't know it all is what prevents us from having more of an open mindset. And so when I hear people like you say, and don't get me wrong, I've had a closed mindset myself, right? It's really easy for people, I'm going to say like us, who we are learners. We probably consider ourselves experts on things. We probably think that we know more about certain things than other people know about them, right?
Yes.
And so when we have that perspective, we just need to be sensitive to that, right? Because if we see ourselves as the expert and we don't rein that in, we're going to be quick to dismiss the ideas and suggestions of others. And so part of it is we've got to be willing to let go of our identity as an expert and be willing to say, well, I know a lot. The bucket is really big. Like the potential, I may have a lot of water in my bucket, but the bucket is really big. And if we could tell ourselves that story, it allows us to be a little bit more open. So when I talk to people like you, as well as others, there's other folks that have written there. In fact, there's one person who I've talked to who's rated as one of the top 50 business minds in the world. And she had a strong closed mindset. And what she said is, I thought I had an open mindset. And then we talked through some of these ideas, and she's like, oh, I get it, right? And so hopefully some of those ideas resonate with you. I don't know. What do you think?
They certainly do. And you know what? When I did the test and I realized that I had a closed, and I think the interpretation that, if I remember correctly, was a strong closed mindset. So obviously I was not happy with it, but it made complete sense and I accepted it. I mean, I was not offended or anything, because deep down I know that this is the case, that I really And that's something that I have been working on and trying to improve, but I know that I don't like being wrong. I do have, because I have knowledge of many things, and I consider my knowledge to be above the average of, the people that I speak with. So in a way, you mentioned the word ego, and I think that's exactly right. Get into the position of admitting that, I'm wrong, hurts that ego. Which, yeah.
No, that's fantastic. Let me commend you for your vulnerability in saying that.
Thank you.
Because in what you're doing for your listeners is you're modeling exactly what needs to happen if we want to shift our mindsets. Is we've got to own our current mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
We've got, if we live in denial, we're never going to make any improvements. And so we've got to own it. But we can, as a way to help us own it, is we need to understand that for most of us, we've never really focused on our mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
And if we've never focused on improving our mindsets, should we expect to be great in our mindsets? Well, no, right? So when you take the assessment, and when others can take the assessment, it's free on my website, so anybody can take it, and I invite them to do so. When you see results, this is not something to beat yourself up over. What it's doing is it's just identifying your starting place. And then it's also helping you identify what direction you now need to head in to be able to make yourself more successful and more effective in whatever you're doing.
Yes, sure. And I enjoyed very much when I took the test that there were recommendations on how to improve on it. And I certainly didn't beat myself down, even though that is something that I tend to do as a person. But this was for me, it was a realization, because mindset is something that I'm constantly working on improving as part of, my ongoing personal development journey, and what I'm doing with the podcast and my role as, I will go back to that beautiful definition about the leadership, the positive influence that you said, which I love that. So identifying shortcomings in my mindset, or things that I'm not happy with, or things that I can improve, is paramount. It's essential for me to then start working on it. And can you tell me, before we go on to the next set of mindset, so for someone like me with a closed mindset, how would you recommend to improve on it? What kind of steps should someone like me take to admit that they can be wrong from time to time?
Yeah. So there's one is kind of our self-talk. How do we talk to ourselves? Okay. And just asking yourself the question, how full is my bucket?
Okay.
It can just be something in the moment that can help you just kind of flip into that more open mindset. There's a fantastic book called Principles by Ray Dalio. He's the founder of Bridgewater Associates. Mm-hmm. And his whole book is about radical open-mindedness and exposing yourself to the ideas of the benefits of open-mindedness can be really beneficial. If it's a pretty big book, if you're not into reading, he has a 30-minute series of about 8 or 9 episodes that together are 30 minutes that you can find on YouTube. It's called Principles for Success by Ray Dalio. So these are examples of these 3-minute video clips that we could watch on a regular basis that over time will shift our mindsets. These are just ways to exercise our mindsets. Having conversations with other people. So the people that you work with, you can ask them, when are times that I am closed-minded? How does that affect you? When are times that I am open-minded? How does that affect you? So having conversations with other people, getting feedback from other people is another activity that we can engage in. So those are a few examples of these are just different ways or different exercises to strengthen those more positive mindset neural connections.
That's great. Thank you very much.
For sure.
Let's move on then to the next set of mindsets. And I'll let you speak about it.
Yeah. So the next set is the difference between a prevention mindset and a promotion mindset.
Mm-hmm.
When we have a prevention mindset, our primary focus is on not losing. When we have a promotion mindset, our primary focus is on winning and gains. So to explain the difference between the two, I want us to imagine two ship captains, and they're both in the middle of the ocean. One has a prevention mindset and one has a promotion mindset. Now, the one with a prevention mindset, that ship captain's number one focus is going to be on not sinking.
Yes.
They don't want any problems to occur. They don't want to take any risks. They don't want to rock the boat because they don't want to end up at the bottom of the ocean. The person with the promotion mindset, it's not that they're not concerned about sinking, because they are, but their number one focus is on getting to a destination.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we have these different focus, one is not sinking, one is getting to a destination, what happens when a storm comes on the horizon? Well, when a storm comes on the horizon, the person with the prevention mindset is going to run for safety, go back to a harbor. But here's the thing about, well, I guess let me jump forward. The person who has a promotion mindset, when they see the storm on the horizon, they're going to ask the question, does that storm between me and my destination? And if it is, that individual will prepare for the challenge. They'll batten down the hatches. They'll become willing to take the risk and brave the storm because they know that that's the only way to get where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of the day, the difference between these two people is those with the prevention mindset end up in a destination that they didn't proactively decide. It's only those with the promotion mindset that are able to end up at a destination of their own proactive design.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the huge difference. So in order for us to have this promotion mindset, we've got to have a clear destination, a clear purpose, clear goals, because when we don't have those, we will take on the default, which is this prevention mindset, which largely revolves around avoiding problems and playing it safe. But that just generally doesn't lead to success.
Absolutely. And I made a note about that the prevention mindset, that it is valuing our comfort and having less stress in our lives, which is the opposite of the opposite mindset, which is ensuring that we live our life to the fullest. And any practical ways of switching that or improving on this set of mindsets?
Yeah, for sure. So one kind of big general one is coming up with a purpose for our lives, okay, and some clear goals. We've got to identify a destination that we want to arrive at, right? Something that's helpful for this. So I think as I look back at my adult life, I've really struggled with having a prevention mindset. I mean, I feel like I've done some really cool things, like got a Ph.D., but I did it because I thought it would be a way to set myself up for greater comfort in the long term, right? Okay. So my motives were really prevention minded. A couple of years ago, I was given a book. I don't know if you could see it here. It's called the 5-Minute Journal. Yes. Uh-huh. So this individual hands me the 5-minute journal. And he says, "This will change your life." And I said, in my mind, "You are out of your mind. There is no way I am journaling." Right? So I take it home, and it turns out that it's just supposed to be 5 minutes every day. It has 3 questions for you to answer in the morning and 2 questions for you to answer at night. One of the sets of questions in the morning is, what would make today great? One of the questions at night is, what are 3 amazing things that happened today? So as I started to do the 5-minute journal, what it was doing, this was the exercise for more positive mindset neuroconnection. Mm-hmm. Is every day I was thinking, how do I make today great? I was painting my destination. And then I was reflecting on what made it so amazing. And what ended up happening is I started to get into a competition with myself. All right. How do I make today better than yesterday? And while this was really great and really started to get me shifting into a more promotion mindset, it was a little bit empty because it was kind of on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, I picked up, I don't know if you'll see this, it's called the Full Focus Planner. It's done by Michael Hyatt. There's a variety of great planners out there.
Mm-hmm.
But the planner forced me to set long-term goals and then break it down into parts in quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily.
Mm-hmm.
And the combination of the two has been a game changer for me. So one of the things that I've done in the last year and a half is I've written a book. It's available for pre-order on Amazon and other sources. But I would have never written a book had I not shifted over into a promotion mindset. Like, we wouldn't be having this conversation if I hadn't made that shift. So those are a couple of examples that have really been beneficial for me.
Thank you. And when you showed me the journal, I used the Best Self journal, which I've been using for a couple of years. Similar questions, what would make this day a win for you and things like that. And it's a real game changer since I've started doing it. It's very important.
Yeah.
Thank you. And shall we go over the inward and the last set of mindsets?
Yeah.
Then?
So the last set is the difference between an inward mindset and an outward mindset.
Yes.
When we have an inward mindset, we see ourselves as being more important than others. And when we see ourselves as being more important than others, this leads us to see them more like objects. Usually either a barrier that's getting in our way or as an instrument to get us where we want to go. When we have an outward mindset, we see others as being just as important as ourselves. When we see them as just as important as ourselves, their needs and wants matter just as much as our own needs and wants. This allows us to see them as people and to value them as such. So when we have this inward mindset, we generally are seeing others in a way that generally causes us to be quite critical of them. And we're just not going to have that positive influence that we need to have. It's only when we see people as people and value them as such, and really be able to have the empathy that comes with that perspective, that we can have that positive influence on others' lives. So let me give you just a really quick, great example of this. There's a gentleman, his name is Benjamin Zander. He's the founder and conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. Mm-hmm. And he said for the first half of his career, he had an inward mindset. He was the stereotypical authoritative leader who saw his musicians not as people, but as instruments, there to play the music the way that he wanted it to be played. But then he said halfway through his career, professional career, he had an epiphany that while he may be the face of the orchestra, he doesn't play a note. When he realized this, he said, wow, okay, he shifted more to an outward mindset. And what this allowed him to do is, instead of see his musicians as instruments, to see them as people. Mm-hmm. And when he made this shift, rather than trying to get them to play the music the way that he wanted it to be played, he tried to get them to play the music the best way that they were capable of playing the music. And what do you think elicited better music? Right? Probably the one where you harness the power of the musicians and helping them bring out their individual greatness. And as you do that, the orchestra as a whole gets better. So I think that's a fantastic example that demonstrates the shift in mindsets and the effect that it can have on those around us.
So if we haven't had an epiphany like he had to shift the mindset from inward to outward, how can we work towards it?
Yeah, so I think for me, a lot of it is self-talk.
Okay.
So I could ask myself, am I inward or outward? Am I seeing them as a person? Am I seeing them as an object? Another great question is, and this actually comes from Benjamin Zander, there's a great TED Talk that he has where he talks about this. And he says, the question is, who am I being that their eyes are not shining? I mean, it's a beautiful question. Like, if something goes wrong, can you ask yourself, who am I being that their eyes are not shining? So rather than point your finger at what's the problem, what's wrong with you, we first look at us and say, who am I being that isn't allowing them to be at their best. And you can only take that approach if you have this outward mindset. Another great question to think about comes from Brene Brown. And she asked the question, do you think in general that people are doing the best that they can? And what she says is that when we don't think that other people are doing the best that we can, we become rather critical of them. In fact, it's probably an indication that we're a perfectionist. It's only those with an outward mindset that could see others as doing the best that they can. And it's only when we see others that they're doing their best that we're able to be truly empathetic to them. And so I think some ideas are just asking ourselves questions. There's a group called the Arbinger Institute who has written a number of books on these different mindsets. One is called Leadership and Self-Deception, is great. Of course, I'll point people to my book. Of course, I talk about these things in my book. So
I will link everything on the show notes of the episode. Yes.
Awesome. And so anyways, just exposing yourself to some of these ideas and resources, that to me, this is the set of mindsets that I struggle with the most. And I was awakened to this. I thought I saw the world in the best way. And I was only awakened to it till I read Arbinger Institute's book, Leadership and Self-Deception. And that is what created greater awareness. And that started my journey to shifting my mindsets. Now, I'm not perfect. This is always something that I'm sure I'll battle with. But I definitely could say that I've made shifts, and I feel like I'm much more on the positive side of the continuum now.
Certainly. And I would say for myself that perfection, well, we will never achieve that anyway. So it's a matter of just journeying through progression and growth. And you mentioned the word perfectionist earlier, which really hit a chord there with me, because I have suffered, and I will use very honestly the word suffered with this kind of idea that I have to be perfect. And it was only the last few years when I realized that this is unachievable, first of all, because there is no such thing as perfection. But even the idea of trying to be perfect, it was only preventing me of putting myself out there and doing things, because of the fear that it may not be perfect enough. So it's a very great personal lesson for me, all this.
No, and I love it. And I love your use of the word suffer, because I think that describes it well. In Brene Brown's work, she focuses on shame, because shame is what is the result of perfectionism. And shame is something that we all struggle with. And it's also something that we don't talk about particularly enough. And so if shame is something that we struggle with, Brene Brown's work is really powerful.
I will certainly look into her work and see that, because it's very interested in that. It was one of the other results on my assessment test that I was maybe not as surprised as the other one, but still I was. When something becomes clear to you, or when someone tells you something about yourself, or they hold a mirror in front of you and you see an element of yourself that you tend to overlook, or you tend not to maybe bring it to surface so much, and you realize it beyond any doubt, and you want to change it, it's important. First you get the realization that, whoa, is that really who I am? Oh, yes, it is. So let me try and work on it. So thank you so much, Ryan. This is, I think it's immensely useful, apart from myself, of course, for everyone that listens, and in terms of understanding their mindsets, the different kinds of, thinking, behaving, and where it all comes from and what they can do about it. I would like just to touch upon quickly one more topic, and then I have a few quick fire questions, if I may.
Okay.
The other topic I wanted to touch about, which is something that you also work with, is mindfulness. Mm-hmm. So I know this is a very big topic to just briefly describe, but I want your take on what it is, how important it is, and how we can improve on it.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because if you would have asked me 2 years ago if I would ever be on a podcast talking about mindfulness and meditation, I would have said you're out of your mind, right? But as I've gotten into learning about mindsets, I've learned about the power of mindfulness. And to me, in the way that I defined mindfulness, it's a combination of two things: presence and awareness. And when we have presence and awareness, we are able to be mindful. We're able to sit with our current situation and navigate it in the best possible way. And where I think that this discussion on mindsets focuses on is that awareness component. So we need to be aware of these largely non-conscious aspects of our lives that are driving it. And it's only until we become aware of those that we can truly be mindful and best navigate the situations that we encounter. So I think that in some ways, the focusing on our mindsets is a shortcut to greater mindfulness. Now, mindfulness as a whole, I think, is a lifelong journey of really being able to be present. And that requires exercises in and of itself. And that's where meditation comes in. Meditation is just a form to exercise our mindfulness muscles. But the more that we exercise those mindfulness muscles, actually what it's doing is it's breaking down the rigidity of our neural connections in our brain. So if we want to shift our mindsets, we are going to be more effective if we can add in a meditation practice to that, because the meditation starts softening some of these more rigid mindsets that we may have had for decades, or even sometimes even longer than that. So does that make sense? Is that align with what you're thinking?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Yes. In terms of meditation, any particular technique or anything that you think that is more effective?
Well, I would say that I'm no expert in meditation. I'm very much a novice like most people. And so I would say if somebody hasn't started meditating or hasn't really tried it, to me, the best source has been the Headspace app. You could download it, and they've got an introductory series to meditation. Sure. And that introductory series is the best introductory series that I've come across. And so if somebody's saying, hey, I want to look into this, I think that that's the best place to go. And then I think for me, I've just tried to experiment with a wide variety of things and just what works best for me. And I'm still on that journey. And so I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm still also trying to make it more of a habit as opposed to, I haven't been doing it as frequently as I would like to. And so I need to figure out a better way to integrate it on a more regular basis.
For me, the meditation the last few months has been a non-negotiable part of my morning routine. And I can see that it has started improving things. I don't meditate for long. It's 10 minutes, but still having the discipline to do that 10 minutes every single morning, no matter what, plays a big role in how my day is going to evolve afterwards. Yes.
That's great.
Ryan, thank you. And just some quick fire questions as well. If you could go back in time and meet your 20-year-old self, what's the piece of advice you would give him that could potentially change his life?
Yeah, focus on your mindset. And here's why I say that is because personal and self-development has always been a huge thing for me. But for most of my journey and my personal development, I haven't focused on mindsets. And what has resulted from that is, in all honesty, a lot of frustration. You see, let me just kind of visually paint a picture here for our listeners. Is if we have a triangle, and I'm going to call this our success triangle, and at the top is success.
Yes.
Well, what's the next layer down? What drives our success? Well, it's our behaviors. It's the things that we do that drives our success. 90% of people, when they focus on their personal development, focus there on improving their behaviors. But it's a little bit short-sighted because we need to ask ourselves, what drives our behaviors? And so that's the next layer down, and that's our thinking. And I think about 9% of people focus there. And that's better than focusing on our behaviors because it's more foundational. But we can't stop there. We need to ask ourselves, what drives our thinking? And that next layer down is our foundation, and that's our mindsets. And so when we try to develop ourselves by pulling forward our behaviors and our thinking, what ends up happening is our prevailing mindsets resist that effort. And when we find ourselves in a stressful situation, are we going to go with what we've been working on or our prevailing mindsets? We're going to generally go back to our prevailing mindsets. Sure. And so if we're not talking about mindsets as a part of the personal development process, it's going to be really frustrating. We're not going to see the return on our investment that we want to see. A much better approach is to push forward our mindsets. As we push forward that bottom level of the pyramid, our thinking will naturally follow, our behavior will naturally follow that, and so will our success. So if I could go back to my 20-year-old self, it would be explaining that to him. And that if you could focus on your mindsets, then everything else will take care of itself.
Sure, thank you. And one more hypothetical question like this. Say you have a magic wand and you could wave it and change something in the world as it is today. What would you change?
So, I mean, there's so many things that I would want to change.
Only one.
And I mean, but it all is related to the idea of mindsets and just greater consciousness.
Okay.
So I think that one of the things that we're seeing in our world is a greater divide. There's greater polarization. It could be political views, religious views, whatever. There's growing polarization. But one of the benefits of this, which is actually really cool, and I think this is where kind of your podcast fits in, is what is rising up in the void in the middle here is I'm going to say broadly the mindfulness movement. Is it there are people that are now rising in the middle that are saying, look, we don't need to take sides. We can sit with both perspectives and be okay with that because we're going to be mindful, we're going to be present, we're going to be conscious. And if we can cause that middle group to grow bigger, and really it's a wave that's crashing. So I just want that wave to crash quicker, I think is what I want. Because if we can get that group to grow, the world is going to be a better place.
I agree completely, 100%. And I would love that group to grow as well, because it's going to change humanity. If people realize the mindset, the way of thinking, that it's something that we can always improve on. It will just be a catalyst, in my opinion, for the human consciousness. That's how I see it. And just one more or two more actually. One is whether you had any big aha moments the last year or so that you want to share, and also conversely, if you had some big mistake or lesson learned that you wanted to share for people to avoid.
So a big aha for me was I knew about mindsets prior to this past year, right? So I knew about these 4 different sets of mindsets. What I didn't know was the neuroscience and the cognitive psychology behind them. So for me, that has been the huge aha, which has been a game changer because it helps me better understand how you bring about change in our mindsets. So to me, that's the big aha. If I could change anything, I don't know, nothing's coming to mind, but a quote is coming to mind that I want to, I just got to find it here. Give me just a second.
You read my next question would be if you have any quote that you wanted to share.
Yeah. So this was in my full focus planner the other day and it stuck with me. This is from Nelson Mandela. And he says, I never lose. I either win or learn. And so when you ask the question of, is there any mistake that you made? Well, yeah, that maybe I lost some things, but I gained some things as well, in terms of I learned some things that didn't work. And so there's nothing really that I feel like I'm hung up with or frustrated about, because it's kind of a win-win situation. Either I benefit from it directly or I benefit from it indirectly. And as long as I can keep that attitude, then I think I'm in a good place.
Fantastic. Ryan, how can people connect with you? How they can find more about you? Where would you direct them?
Yeah, my website is a great place to go, ryangottfredson.com. Probably the second best place to connect with me is via LinkedIn. That's where I'm the most active. And you can just find me there pretty easy. There's not too many Gottfredsons out there in the world, so I'm sure we could connect.
Awesome. And I will put all the links, everything we talked about, on the show notes for people to be able to follow that easily. I want to thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you at the podcast today, and you've given some tremendous insights. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best with your further research and your work.
No, thank you so much. I really have enjoyed meeting you, being interviewed by you, and really thank you for trusting me to put me in front of your audience. It really means a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ryan. All the best. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. Please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in.